All right, guys, it's time we talk about our business finances. So today's guest on the podcast is Dondrea Owens, who is the owner of The Creative's CFO. Dondrea is a CPA and an expert on the creative industry, specifically when it comes to money, which I love. So this isn't going to be some advice for like restaurant business owners or manufacturing businesses or anything like that. She's sharing common mistakes that creatives make, like designers, photographers, artists, wedding industry pros, even coaches, all of you guys listening basically. So you'll walk away from this episode with a better understanding of your business finances and the confidence to make smarter money decisions going forward. There's so much good stuff in these 7 mistakes we're sharing. So let's dive in. Hey guys, it's Elizabeth McCravey and you're listening to the Breakthrough Brand Podcast. Each week, I'll bring you workshop-style trainings that teach you how to stand out online, design success from the inside out, and create a breakthrough business. It's time to turn viewers into raving fans and design the business and life of your dreams. I'm so excited you're here. Welcome back, you guys. I'm really excited to share my guest, Dondrea Owens, with you today. And this interview is just stellar. And I think it's going to give you so much more financial confidence. We ask some really good questions and talk about some serious mistakes you might be making. And we're talking specifically about mistakes that creative women entrepreneurs make around their finances. And some of these might be mistakes you're making right now. I certainly resonated with a few of them being mistakes I made early on in my business, and you'll hear me point to those and tell a little story with them as well. But before we get to this interview, I want to tell you a little bit about my guest. So Dondrea is the founder of The Creative CFO, and she's a certified public accountant and specializes in helping small business owners. So her focus is helping you know your numbers so you can grow your profit, up level your life, and keep more money while doing it, which I really, really love that. And she knows the field we're in outside of working with people as being a client. So a cool thing, I really love this. We touched on it a little bit, but for years, she actually worked in public accounting by day and ran a wedding invitation business in her spare time. So she knows like the financial struggles that these industries have from like being in it herself, and has a real grasp on it. So it gives her a really nice perspective on things. And on a personal level, she lives in Georgia with her husband and 2 kids, which you'll also hear us talk about towards the end of this episode. So before I play this awesome interview, I want to tell you something cool happening this week, like just a quick little plug. I'll keep this real short. But you'll hear us mention Dubsado on this episode as a tool. And Dubsado is actually this week, the week this episode airs, having their big summer sale. So that's July 27th through July 31st of 2020. And on the day this episode airs on Tuesday, I'm actually doing a live webinar for Dubsado about how to use Dubsado to attract and book more ideal design clients. And I'm really excited about it. I'm actually, at the time I'm recording this intro, working on prepping all that webinar content this week. So if you're a graphic designer, or you want to be, if that's like your dream for your business, be sure to tune into this webinar or watch the replay if you're hearing this later after it's already happened. I will put the links for all that in the show notes so you can access it. But it's going to be a really cool pitch-free webinar. I'm just going to be showing some like secrets I've used relating to Dubsado, which is a CRM, by the way. If you're like, what the heck am I talking about? It's a CRM tool to help you manage client experiences and invoicing, contracts, all of that kind of stuff. But I'll be sharing how I've used it to really grow my design business. So definitely listen to that. Link in the show notes. And if you do sign up for Dubsado this week during their summer sale, you can use my code Elizabeth30 to get an additional 30% off in addition to the sale price. Okay, so you don't want to do the sale without a discount code, first of all. So use the discount code and then get even better than the sale price with that 30% off. And I'll also get some kickback too for using my link. So it's a win-win for both of us. And be sure to watch the webinar too. And if you're like, I don't even know what Dubsado is, but I'm curious, go to elizabethmccravey.com/Dubsado. That's DUBSADO. And I'm linking to that again in the show notes, but definitely check them out and listen to the webinar. It's going to be fun. I'm really excited about doing it. Okay. So now that we have that little info out of the way, I'm so excited for you to meet Dondrea. Let's play that interview. So you guys, I have Dondrea Owens here on the podcast, and we're going to be talking all about money mistakes you might be making as a creative entrepreneur. So welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. Okay. So to start, I would love for you, I already know pieces of your story from hearing you talk about this other places, but I'd love for you to just share who you are, what you do, and who you help.
Okay, so like you said, my name's Dondrea. I am a CPA and I work with women entrepreneurs to reach their numbers so that they can grow their profit. And so I was introduced to the online community way back when I was designing wedding invitations, and it's my favorite place to be. So I decided to bring my professional expertise over and work with business owners that I absolutely love.
And I think I want to point out here, because I think that's such a cool part of your story, that you are both like the finance side, but you also have done graphic design, because so many people listening are in that like creative industry specifically, but like merging both together and having done both at different times is so cool and gives you such a cool perspective on the finance side too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so I'm really excited about these tips, you guys. She sent me the tips beforehand, so I've already like read through them, and these are like for real mistakes, and ones I have made in my business early on, and some possibly still sometimes. So I'm really excited to learn from you as we go through these. So first, though, actually, let's start with this question, because I think it's a big one that kind of frames the whole conversation. Why is it so important that we know our numbers? Because something I've seen in myself at times, and also in other women who consider themselves creative, is that we think like, oh, we don't have like the finance mind. And so you can kind of be like, oh, I'm just going to like ignore that part. I'm just going to I love creating, I love being creative, and kind of ignore the money. So like, what would you say to the woman who's like, ooh, I kind of am ignoring my finances?
Yeah. It's such, like you said, it's such a common theme. But the advice that I give often is that you're either running a business or you just have a really expensive hobby. And so that ultimately separates owners from hobbyists. It's just having a clear view of the numbers, knowing when you're making a profit, knowing what your profit producing activities are, and really staying there so that you continue operating a business and that you're not moving over into, oh, I do this for fun.
And so many women too, I think, struggle with even calling themselves a business owner too, which is another thing that kind of connects to that. Because if you see yourself as like, I'm just a freelancer, that can put you even more into the hobby mindset.
Absolutely. And I see it presented in a few different ways. Like you said, the freelancer, the side hustler, the person who it's like a passion project, all of things sort of shift our mindset into thinking that, oh, we shouldn't be making money from this, or not a lot of it. And sometimes it's pretty scary to reframe that mindset and become a business owner, because then comes responsibility. And so I always question whenever someone is having a hard time switching from one or the other to say, well, what is it that you're really telling yourself? And then let's work on what the truth is in that. And so in that way, we're able to get them thinking more like a business owner and less about, oh, I'm just doing this thing for fun.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's really good. Okay. I love that. And let's take that and now frame that mindset around these 7 mistakes you're going to share. And you guys, as we go through these, we're going to talk through all 7. And I want to encourage you to like look at your own business and ask like, is this something I'm doing? Is this something I'm subconsciously doing? Because I think some of these are like, you might think you're not doing them at a first glance. Right. So I just want to encourage you to really like challenge yourself on these. So let's start with the first one. What's the first one?
Okay. So the very first one is taking on too many expenses. And I think we've all been there. We see, we call them the shiny objects, but we see courses that promise to deliver certain results. And those are things we know that we need in our business, or we need an extra set of hands, more support. And so we hire a new team member. And before we know it, we turn around and we've got a whole line of expenses here that we've sort of lost sight of in just operating the business. And it's so important that we are checking in periodically. I like to say monthly, and looking at what our expenses truly are and how those are lining up with the money that we are bringing into the business.
Yeah.
And so it really just becomes having an eye on what the expenses are and why they're necessary, because a true business expense is necessary to run your business. If you're looking and questioning whether a particular expense is necessary, then chances are it might be dragging down your bottom line and you need to reevaluate.
That's a good way to put it, of what it is and why it's necessary.
Yeah.
And I have a question with that I'm curious for my own purposes as well.
Yeah.
When we talk about, looking at the percent that we're spending of the revenue, is there a percentage that you would say we should aim to stick around of spending?
Yes. Okay. So you're talking about profit margin, which means there's an amount that you bring in and there's an amount that you spend, and then there should be an amount that's left over. And so I aim for, with clients, our very first benchmark is to hit 50% profit margin. And operating an online business is often really easy to do that, especially for service-based businesses. Beyond that, 70% is the next benchmark. And between there, that kind of tells you, so if your profit margin is 50%, that means of what you brought in, you spend 50% of it on expenses. If your profit margin is 70%, that means you spend 30% of your sales on the business, running the business. And so I use those as guidelines. Now, if you're not there quite yet, it just means that this is your next goal. It means you're looking at some of your expenses and deciding if something's unnecessary. It also means that you're looking to see if you can save perhaps on annual subscriptions to software that you know you're going to continue to use instead of paying monthly, because you'll save a bit there. And it also means truly looking at your sales and seeing where you need to ramp things up.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that clear cutness of it. And I have a follow-up question with that too. Mm-hmm. When you say 50% or 70%, does that include the expense of paying ourselves, or what all is included when we're talking about the expense when you come up with that number?
Got you. So we are primarily talking about operations from which you are simply the owner, not once you make yourself an employee of the business. And so what we would like to see is that from the sales that you bring in, advertising, marketing, your team, any office expenses that you have, things like that, software. So we're looking at all of those things. And then where it falls out into the profit is where you then come in. And there's another set of percentages we use for that, which I think we're going to touch on a little bit later. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. That's awesome. And and so in my business, I've been better lately about tracking this, of what percentage I'm keeping. And I found out I track it based on quarterly. Is what's been helpful for me. But I found that I'm only spending about 18 to 20%, which I felt good
awesome.
About. Is that good?
Yes.
Okay.
That's really good.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. Okay. So taking out too many expenses. I love that. So looking at what the expense is, really honing in on, is it necessary? And yeah, I think for me too, especially looking at that on a pretty recurring basis, whenever you're your bookkeeping, of seeing is this necessary?
Right.
Okay, let's talk about the second mistake.
Okay, so the second mistake I see is paying your team and not paying yourself. You'd be surprised at how many business owners aren't paying themselves, but they're paying a team. And so I stress the importance in yourself, because there's no job that you would go to and work as many hours as you work in your business without the expectation of pay. Also consider that for some of us, we want to invest in our businesses and grow a little bit faster. And that's a wonderful consideration. But at the same time, understanding that it is a muscle that you have to develop to pay yourself, because it's really easy to not do that step. So even if it's just, I'm going to pay myself $100 every month, that is a start. Some people go with percentages. then that is great, but never should that number be 0.
Interrupting this episode with a suggestion for the small business owners listening. Ever wonder what you should do for healthcare when you and your spouse are both self-employed, so there's no work-provided health insurance to participate in? Well, when my husband Adam joined me in the entrepreneurial job space over 4 years ago, we joined Christian Healthcare Ministries instead of getting traditional health insurance. And it was the best decision for us, especially in these years of growing and raising a family while also running multiple businesses. CHM is a health cost-sharing ministry and is a faith-based alternative to health insurance. We did tons of research before choosing CHM, and if you know me and Adam, you know we are all about doing the math when making big or small financial decisions. And even though it's not insurance, CHM shares 100% of eligible medical bills, which is more than the typical 70 or 80% of medical bills paid for by insurance companies. All sharing is determined by the CHM guidelines, which you can check out before and after joining. And for the mamas and mamas to be listening, you truly cannot find a better healthcare option for maternity care. I had a vaginal delivery and a C-section and birth center care and hospital care between my 2 pregnancies and births, and it was all 100% shared for. And outside of birth, we've had our share of emergency room visits and procedures as a family, and those costs were all shared by members at Christian Healthcare Ministries, leaving us only paying our monthly contribution. CHM is less expensive month to month than insurance, and because there's no network, you can choose your care with whichever providers best fit your family. I seriously just cannot recommend Christian Healthcare Ministries enough. You've got to check them out. Go to elizabethmccravey.com/CHM for more information. Also putting that link in the show notes, elizabethmccravey.com/CHM. Now back to the episode.
Yeah, that would be horrible to not be paying yourself anything in the business, but then like be paying a big team or even just like one other person, but not paying yourself. And that's something I'm curious what you think about this too, but that's something I've recently been trying to pay really close attention to is like, how much am I actually paying myself? Because so often we can just be like, oh, the business makes this much, but then it's like, well, what am I making?
Right.
You know?
Yeah, we've got to keep a close eye on it. Just because your business should be supporting your life and you don't have to, beyond a particular period, you don't have to sacrifice your own well-being for this business. That's how a lot of business owners encounter burnout in their business.
Yeah.
And so we want to avoid that at all costs.
Okay. All right. I love that. So the second mistake, paying your team, but not paying yourself. Okay. I'm curious to hear. I'm very excited to hear about this third one. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. Okay. Waiting the whole year to pay taxes. I have been guilty of this very thing. So all of these mistakes we're talking about, feel absolutely no shame. Either your peers have done it, I've done it, and I'm a pro. So, feel no type of way about it. But waiting the entire year to pay taxes opens you up to unexpected cash flow dips, which can affect what you're able to do going forward in your business. It can also open you up to penalties from the IRS for underpayment. So my recommendations there are to get yourself into the flow of paying quarterly estimated taxes. And the best way to be able to do that and do that in the right amount is to do your bookkeeping. And so, you can choose to do the bookkeeping monthly, or like you said, quarterly is great. Quarterly falls right in line with the schedule for submitting estimated taxes. But it's a great habit to develop very early on.
Yeah, that's so good. And like for me, I do bookkeeping once a week typically, but then looking at like the profit margin stuff more like on a quarterly basis. But a question with that, like when we think about paying quarterly estimated taxes, what percentage do you recommend we be paying from our?
So as a catch-all, I use something called the 50-30-20 method for all of the business owners I work with. And that is just our starting point. So we look at profits across the board, and we're assigning 50% for personal pay, 30% for taxes, and 20% for business savings. Now, the 30% for taxes is the maximum. And so this is for a business owner who is making significantly more this year than they were making last year. And so we don't want them to have unexpected tax liability. But once you are able to determine and kind of set a base point for what your profits will be, we're able to better hone in on the percentage that should actually be your percentage for estimating taxes. But like I said, as a general catch-all, we use 30% as the starting point. And I've not had any business owners who really wanted to switch away from that, because here's why. Even when they overestimate their taxes, their tax liability, at the end, once they make that, any extra that they have saved, they're able to write themselves a bonus check. And not one has complained about that. I wouldn't complain about that either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that. Yeah, it's so much, but it's better like safe than sorry too on that. Like what you're saying of, it's so scary to have a big tax bill all of a sudden at the end of the year. So I like that 30% number. Can you share again? So you said 30% to tax and then 20% to business savings. What was the other number you shared with that?
50% for personal pay.
Okay.
So this is for business owners who've not yet become employees of their business, meaning that they've elected to be taxed as an S corporation. So they are your LLCs, sole proprietorships, all of them.
Okay, which that's who most of you guys listening are going to fall into, that of being an LLC or a sole proprietor. I love that. That's such a good framework for us to check on. So 50% personal, 30% tax, 20% business savings, right?
That's right.
Okay, awesome. Any other thoughts on that one about waiting the whole year on taxes that we need to add?
I think that's it. Just getting into the flow of paying quarterly taxes and saving the 30% to start. I think that's a great place for anyone to start.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. Okay, the fourth tip, and you guys, everyone listening, y'all have heard me talk about this one on the podcast already. So let's dive into this one.
So this one is my favorite one. Using apps like Venmo or Cash App to receive client and customer payments. It's a huge no-no.
Yeah.
For one, it avoids the merchant protections for you and for whomever is purchasing from you. And we don't want that to happen. In recent months, I've seen cases where either Venmo or Cash App have frozen funds inside of someone's account because they determined that they were a business collecting payments as opposed to an individual. And depending on how frequently you have payments coming through, I would hate for anyone to experience a cash drought because their funds are withheld and frozen. So it's just not a really good way. Besides that, having to track that, you're missing the income reporting from your clients because you might be using that to pay for personal things. So you just really lose sight of the money that's coming in and going out.
Yes. So I feel passionate about this one from a personal experience. So I got kicked off Cash App for doing this early on because I was accepting I like a couple thousand in one payment, and the person being a client is labeling the payment invoice number 3 because that's what they wanted to call it for their own purposes. And and it's like that really got me of like, like this is not okay the way I'm doing it. And in addition to what you just said, like it also is a better experience for our clients because if they're doing good bookkeeping, then they're going to be wanting to have the receipts and invoices and all of that, which is not happening as much when you're doing those apps.
That's true. Very, very true.
What would you recommend then as like a starting point for someone who's like, okay, I'm going to quit using those apps for stuff. What can I use instead? What would you tell them?
Okay. So the two payment processors I recommend most are Stripe and Square. Yeah. And I recommend those because you can use them as standalone software to invoice from, but you can also connect them to lots of CRMs that are out there that allow you to send contract, invoice, and automate and all of those great things. So I feel like you can't go wrong with those two.
Yes. Okay. I love that. And you guys, too, listening, I'm curious at what you use as a CRM, but I use Dubsado, and they connect to Stripe and PayPal and Square, like you just said. And then you can also let clients pay with a check if they wanted to.
Right.
And I'll drop in the notes for this, but the week we're airing this, Dubsado is having a big sale that would let you guys get an even better discount on that. But and then that lets you do the professionalism of the invoicing, and like even it sends the invoice for you, all of that kind of stuff. So, okay, I love that one. And that is too like such one that like so many of us have done. Like I'm right here, like, yes, that's how I started my business, on Venmo, basically. So you can't come out of it for sure.
For sure.
Okay.
All right. So let's recap these four so far. So we've said taking on too many expenses. So checking if you're doing that, paying your team, but not paying yourself, waiting the whole year to pay taxes, and then using payment apps that are meant for personal use, like the Moan Cash App. Okay. So let's talk about the fifth mistake.
Okay. So the fifth mistake is spending down to the last dollar in your business. And for some people, it ends up being a surprise. They get that email, you spent down to whatever their alert balance is set for. And so really what that comes from is not keeping a keen eye on your cash balance from day to day or setting a new cash zero. And so this is something I do with my clients as well. Zero ending account is not your true zero. There is some balance that once you see it in your bank account, that triggers you to stop spending. And if not, we set one. And so I like to call it your new cash zero. And so for some of my clients, it's a month's worth of expenses. So if their monthly expenses are $2,000, we never spend below $2,000 in the business checking account. And I will tell you, it makes such a difference mentally because once they say, okay, I have no more to spend, there's still $2,000 there. And so there's not the agony and the crushing feeling of being cash poor. There is, okay, I know what I have planned for these funds. And so if I need to spend more, I need to earn more.
I love that. A new cash zero. Yeah. And so you're suggesting that be a month worth of expenses is like a good starting point for that?
For some of my business owners that have teams, that number is much higher because they have a commitment to their team members to be able to pay them or give them adequate notice that they can't anymore. I will reference back to the pandemic when those things started to occur. It was really hard to see people have to let their teams go. But this is definitely a great way to ensure that in the future, if anything like that should occur, you can with your tour as long as you need.
Yeah. That's so true. And with that, if someone listening is like, okay, right now I don't have any like buffer room, like everything in my business account, I'm going to be paying myself. How can that person start like building up that new cash zero for their account?
Okay. So a lot of the times we use that 20% of savings that I mentioned before in the 50, 30, 20 method. We use that to start funding the new cash zero in the checking account. And so that is its first purpose. Once that purpose is fulfilled, then we move on to just general business savings. And that savings account can be used for investments in a new website or with the coach or anything that is coming up, equipment in your business, a new computer. But we want to have a way to kind of gauge what we're saving every month and assign a purpose to it. But its very first purpose should be to get you to that new zero.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. And I followed that same method in my business this year, actually, because I was the person, I carried a $300 balance. That was like, I knew that was my base, but I was basically paying myself everything. And now I'm saving a very significant amount of money just in the business month to month. So, and it really does feel better. It's way easier on your mind and can help, if something were to happen and you were to like not be able to work or have to do a big refund or have some other crazy expense that you can like handle it.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. I really like that one. Okay. Let's talk about the sixth mistake.
Okay. So the sixth one is investing without setting benchmarks for a return. So it's a hard truth, but it's not really an investment if it doesn't produce a return. And return always have to be a dollar amount. It can be a return of time. It can be more clarity in your business. So there's lots of ways to define the return. However, you need to define it before you make the investment. Yeah. Set the expectation.
Okay. Thinking about that, like for everyone listening, what's something they might be like, it's an investment, but it really is more of an expense and they need to think about the return on?
Okay. One of the ones that I see very early on for business owners is a website, a full-blown, all bells and whistles website. And when you're just starting out in business, I can almost guarantee that the website you start out with is not the one that you'll have in year 2 or you'll find that you need better copy or different graphics or whatever the case may be. New things are coming up for you. And so in the very beginning, what is it that you could use in place of a fully designed website? Is it a lead page? Are you clear on the offer? There's so many questions that have to be answered. And so maybe the investment is not the website with the shiny bells and whistles, and maybe it's a clarity session with the person that you eventually want to do your branding. Maybe it is a brand strategy session with them. It's like getting really clear on what your expectations are. And so if looking at that, you just want to have a clear, cohesive brand, well, we can get you a clear, cohesive brand to start with for way less than all the bells and whistles. Yeah. And so that's something to think about. Some other investments that I see from time to time are high-level coaching. And that's not a dig at all. I work with a lot of coaches. But I also see where some business owners will push themselves to afford coaching that's not exactly in alignment with where they are in business right now. And so I always caution against that, especially if it means that you're taking on personal debt to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, those are great. And yeah, and with the website one, you guys have heard me talk about that on the podcast as well, of like, when it's your first website, it's often best to start with a template and save that money, and also skip the logo even and just get a website template, which is why I love my website template shop so much, because like this can be your first thing. And when I was focused on custom stuff, I turned some people away who it was their first website and they're like, I'm ready to spend $6,000 on this. And it's like, but your business is going to change and evolve so much.
It is.
In the beginning. Yeah. So I love that one and agree on the coaching as well. So it's really focusing on like, is it an investment? And then how can I measure the return?
Right. Awesome. I want to add another one here as well that comes up often, Facebook ads. I've seen some business owners go all out with Facebook ads, and they're great for visibility and exposure and all of that. You have to track those things very closely because you want to be able to recover in sales what you spend on advertisements and then some. You don't want to just break even. And so if you find that that is what is happening with your ads, either adjust them or pause them until you can determine what the driving factor is for getting those sales into your business.
Oof, yes, that's so true. And something too is like a lot of people, when they're looking at their Facebook ads results, are not looking at the cost they're paying the ad manager. Like that should be a subtraction to, in addition to ad costs. I've had to like look at that lately with my ads. That's a good one. What about conferences and things like that? Yeah. What are your thoughts with that as an investment?
Oh, okay. So they've not been going on lately because
all of it now, but it will be again, hopefully.
So, there's a funny misconception that conferences are really great, and they are great for the information shared, for the networking and all of that. But there is a misconception that a conference is a great way to write off a vacation in your business. And so the example that I like to use here is, let's say you're attending a conference that costs you $5,000 to attend. So between purchasing the ticket, the hotel, the car, the travel to get there, all of those things cost you $5,000. And now you have to attend this conference. You're still working, doing all of those things, but it is a business write-off. And so that is its appeal to you. Well, what if I said, even at your highest tax bracket, for that same $5,000, you'd only pay $1,500 in taxes, meaning you'd leave $3,500 to come directly to you to do whatever you want to do with. I personally feel like that $3,500, I could have a great vacation and not do any work and be okay.
Ooh, that's such a good perspective on it. I haven't heard someone lay it out like that of, like if you're thinking of it as a vacation, there's a better way to vacation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's wise. And then, and right now with literally every conference and event I had this year got canceled. And I'm sure everyone else is in a similar boat. So like, if there is a conference where we're like, okay, I know I want to do that intentionally in 2021, like, what are your thoughts on like saving for that right now, since we're not getting to do that this year and that sort of thing?
Right. Make it a line item on your budget. If you can estimate, I have a series of blog posts on my blog that you can just search conference and you'll be able to find those. And I talked about all of the cost of attending a conference and how you could break that up over 6 months or 12 months to be able to prepare yourself. But I like to, like I said, I like to make it a line item on my budget. So what that means is in addition to my 20% that I send over to the business savings, I send over a portion of that payment that I'm expecting to make for the conference to that savings account.
Okay. I love that. And we'll link to that blog series. I've seen that on your blog and have actually read some of those. So we'll link to that in the show notes. Okay. That was a good one. Investing without setting benchmarks. Okay. Let's talk about the seventh and final mistake.
Yes. Using a spreadsheet to maintain your finances. I've done it before. I know a lot of us, it's easy to just go in and make it a task to go in, and when someone signs an invoice or, you send a new invoice, you go in and put the sale in, and that feels good. Or when an expense hits your bank account, you go in and type it in, and it's really clear to you to be able to see it all at once. However, there is bookkeeping software, accounting software that will do all of that for you, and I promise it will save you time. And so we know time costs money. You hire a VA to help you do these things and you're paying her to do it. Why not take advantage of this software that will just make that process automatic for you?
Yes. Okay. So with that one, that's something I have made the mistake of. But I can tell you it's interesting because I still do a spreadsheet, like literally that exact scenario you're describing. Like once a week I go in and I put template sales that have come in and all the recurring payments. But I think of it as my way of budgeting to know what's coming. But then we also use QuickBooks, and I have a bookkeeper who maintains like books in that way. But I still can't let go of my spreadsheet.
Okay. Now there are some instances where the spreadsheet is helpful. And what you're saying to me now is that you are tracking monthly recurring revenue.
Yes.
And so in that event, the spreadsheet is definitely necessary, especially if you don't want to task your bookkeeper with keeping up with all of those, especially if they're like smaller amounts in the high volume of transactions. Yeah. Spreadsheet is useful there. But even with that, for my clients who have those monthly recurring offers, we use cash forecasting software. I wouldn't say as just an individual business owner, you need that. And the spreadsheet could be fine for that. But if you're just tracking regular monthly sales and expenses in Google Sheets or Excel, move over to software.
Okay. And that's something too, you really are speaking to me with that one, because for me, the thing that happens, so for everyone listening who's like, oh, I do only spreadsheets, when you go to tax time and you're looking at all your expenses, there's no clarity on what was advertising, what was, software costs, what was team costs. It's just all thrown in there together, and it's a nightmare. So if you're doing it, I would say what we're saying of I like it for my own, I literally can see at any moment, what I should make the entire year if all these transactions happen. And then I track what I'm paying myself in a tab. I track what taxes I've paid quarterly so far, just so I have a clear picture for me. But yes, that's such a good one. And that's a hard one because accounting softwares are kind of scary, in my opinion.
They can be kind of scary. I will give you credit for that. It's what prompted me to create my Fit Financials course, is to make QuickBooks less scary. It's my software of choice, but I've also used Wave. Wave is also great, especially if you're just starting out and it's the first bookkeeping software you're going to use. I think you'll be fine to start with Wave. It's also free, so there's really no reason why you shouldn't be using bookkeeping software at this point. One of the things to just kind of differentiate between Wave just has a little bit less reporting available. So in QuickBooks, there's hundreds of reports that you could run. In Wave, there's just 3. And those 3 are the 3 core ones that you need, with the most important being the profit and loss statement. And so you want to be able to run that for a month. You want to be able to run it for a year. And then one feature that QuickBooks has that I love and use often is that you have the ability to P&L and show every single month side by side. And so that helps tremendously with making those comparisons and ensuring that you stay on budget with expenses and so forth. and allows you to notice any spikes in particular areas. And so, yeah, the reporting is definitely the piece that you need with software.
Yeah. And I would agree with that. Again, like that's what I'm saying of like when I was just doing spreadsheets, it was like hard to see like where my money was going on the spending side, even though the income side felt like clear enough. But yeah. And you guys will link to those for QuickBooks and Wave in the show notes. And I use QuickBooks, but I started with Wave. And so I'm like, I agree that it's like that one feels simpler and maybe a bit more user friendly. And it's nice that it's free if you're looking to cut expenses like we're talking about in number
Absolutely.
one. Okay. That is awesome. Okay. So I'm going to close this out with some rapid fire questions, and I want you to tell everyone about your course and where they can find you. But first, like a last thing, if you were to just give to the women listening, like a last piece of encouragement about our finances, about avoiding these mistakes, anything, like just what's the last thing you might want to say?
You know, the thing I encourage most is to just take a look at your numbers. It can be a little bit scary to just tune in to what the numbers say. And so I think if you can overcome that fear, take a look at the numbers, then you can make educated decisions about what to do next. But until you know those numbers, all decisions will appear to be hard, and they're really not. Yeah. So just take a look at what's there and then decide your next steps.
That's a great tip. Okay. I've got some rapid fire questions that are some things, really ways for you to advise us even more on stuff that's even not even about bookkeeping, but just about running a successful business. So what's a favorite business book that you would think we should all read?
Yeah. Okay. So I have my favorite one, and it's not even a full book. It's actually a booklet. It's by Lewis Howes, and it's called The Millionaire Morning. Okay. And I will say that little booklet definitely changed the way I ran my business, and I guess how I start my days and what I deem to be important. It's a lot about personal productivity. It's about mindset. I mean, there's so much good stuff in that book. I try to read it at least once a year. But it's really helpful for me to challenge some of my money mindsets and to really look into the way that millionaires operate and what their days look like. And so, yeah, it's been really encouraging to me in that way.
Okay. I need to read that one because I'm very familiar with it, but haven't. I read The Miracle Morning. Are you familiar with that one?
I've heard of that one.
I struggled with it because it was like, it felt so fluffy, like it was too long. And so I love that you're saying this one is a similar name, but short. And because I feel like that's something where it's
short
like,
and sweet.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. All right. A random business software or tool that we should check out.
So I use LastPass every single day. And as you can imagine, all of my clients share passwords in some form with me. And this is like a super easy way to do it. But even for my own passwords, there's no way I can remember them all. So LastPass is like a lifesaver for me. If I did not have it, I'd forever be clicking forgot password.
Okay. Yeah. I use LastPass too, and I love it. That's a great tool.
Yeah.
Okay. A quick tip for managing motherhood and your business, because you run a really successful business, but are also a mom and you have a team and all the things. So like, what's a piece of advice you could give us on that?
Oh my. Okay. So I'll give one that my coach gives me often. She has to remind me. One is to simplify. So anything that I can make simple, I do. And the other is to give myself some grace and know that it is not about work-life balance, so to speak, but more about integration. How can I make my life and business work well together? And so I'm forever looking for that because it's so easy as moms to feel the guilt. Oh, I spent this much time in my business, so I owe this much to my family. You could actually be asking yourself, well, how can I run my business in a way that works with my family life? And then be okay with whatever the outcome of that is. So yeah, give yourself some grace and simplify as much as you can.
Yeah.
Do it all. It's okay.
Yeah. That's a great tip.
especially right now with the kid. I mean, you were saying before we started, you guys, her kids are downstairs, you said, in the basement having iPad time with their dads.
Yes.
Like that's real life though.
It's real life. We're both working from home right now. And I knew that I had this interview today. And so I said, perfect time to give them iPad time. They're not thinking about me for an hour after that. And then once we're done, we'll go outside and catch some fresh air and all will be well. They won't miss me one bit.
I love it. Okay. So last rapid fire question. This relates actually back to what you said as your book choice. But what's a piece of your morning routine that feels super important for you to have a great start to your day?
So I learned early on, my oldest was a little boy at that time, baby, that I needed to wake up and set the morning. I could go downstairs, have my tea, have some quiet time, play with my crystals, whatever I wanted to do in the morning. I would feel like I had made time for myself. And so whenever I have mornings like that, it feels really, really good. I've tried the mornings where you have to journal and you've got to get 15 minutes of exercise. And the one that feels really routine, that doesn't work for me. But easing into the morning feels really good.
I've felt that lately to be true for me too. Yeah. Going simpler, feeling better. Yeah. That's awesome. Well, thanks for those tips. Okay.
Yeah.
To close, tell everyone, you have a course right now that is open, first of all, so we need to talk about that, but then also just where people can connect with you on Instagram, your website, all of it.
Yeah. So I'm on Instagram at The Creative CFO. That's The Creatives with an S. And then also website, thecreativecfo.com.
Awesome. And you want to tell a little bit about your course? Because it's going to be open when this airs, it'll still be open.
Right. So the course is open for enrollment through July 31st. And it is really a really great course to get you through setting an account, customizing the chart of accounts in there, which is all those categories that you use, and being able to maintain your own bookkeeping every single month without fail.
Love it. Love it. Okay. So you guys check that out. Follow on Instagram, all the things. Thank you so much, Dondrea, for being here. This was awesome.
You are welcome. This is great.
Thank you for listening to the podcast this week, friend. I appreciate you being here. And hey, if you enjoyed this episode, I want to tell you about something. I would encourage you to check out my website template shop. Over on elizabethmccravey.com, you'll find Show It website templates, and they are easy to use, strategically designed, and created to help you book more clients and customers. Maybe your current website is really boring. I don't know, maybe it is, and maybe you don't want to hurt its feelings, but you know it's true. And your website needs to be strategically and intentionally designed in order for it to convert your viewers into raving customers. And that's what these website templates do on MShop. These are pre-made website templates built for the Show It platform where you can plug and play your content into the template with ease and then get started with a website that is made to actually make you money. Isn't that what we all want, right? So go shop the templates at elizabethmccravey.com/shop. That link is also in the show notes. And don't forget that you can actually subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening so that you never miss an episode. And I would so appreciate it if you left a rating and review for the show on Apple Podcasts, or even just share it with a friend. It's a great way to support the show and then give us your feedback. So thanks so much for listening.